What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking the most important question. What is the best draft spot to have in your 2024 fantasy football draft? So make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree? What do you think is the best draft spot and why? Along with any other questions you guys might have, we'll do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, let's get right into it. And as you can see, I have got a fantasy football mock draft pulled up here. I just think that this is going to be the best way to illustrate what we are talking about and to visualize pick by pick, round by round, the players that are available, things of that nature. So that's why we're going to use this format. Now, keep in mind, this is a 12-team full PPR setup. Now, for the most part, this is going to hold true if it's a 10-team league as well. Not super different, but in this case, we're going to be looking at a 12-team scenario. And without further ado, we're going to start talking about the different ranges that you can find yourself in when talking about the best pick, because I think that's the way we need to look at it first and foremost. When I say three different ranges, you have the first 1/3 of picks. So if it's a 12-team league, the first 4 picks, then picks 5 through 8, and then finally picks 9 through 12. And, each different range has its own set of advantages and disadvantages. Let's start with the easiest, and, that's the first 4 selections, right? So typically the pros with the first 4 selections is that there's usually a group of players that are a notch slightly above the rest of the field. And being the first 3 or 4 picks very much so increases your chances of landing those guys. Now, especially if you're picking first overall, then you're in charge of the entire draft. Of the first pick overall, you can go literally anywhere you want. The world is your oyster. Typically this year, that is Christian McCaffrey. So, nobody else can take him from you. That is the typical advantage of drafting that early on. The chances of you getting sniped, not that high, especially obviously in that first round. So those are the typical advantages. The disadvantages that I would say is in the second round, you have to wait basically 20 selections until you're getting a chance to make another pick. And usually that run will lead to a tier drop, whether it's at the running back or at the wide receiver position. And I think that is definitely the case this year. If you look at the running backs, if you look at the wide receivers, different rankings, different tiers, for the most part, people are in agreement that after either, A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, and then after guys like Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, maybe Kyron Williams, there is a tier drop, and a pretty drastic one at that, both at the running back and the wide receiver position. Now, again, you do have in the second and third round pretty close together picks, so that is nice, but every single time you're at one of these extremes, whether it's at the beginning or at the start, another downside is that you're going to have to reach for some players more so than you would expect, because if you have to wait 20 selections, then if you really want a quarterback in the third round, chances are waiting 20 more selections in the fourth round, that quarterback that you want ain't going to be there, so you're going to have to pull the trigger in the third round a little bit earlier than you would like, just using that as an example, right? But overall, again, you do come out of the draft with that top tier talent at the top, and hopefully that, hero running back or hero wide receiver, however you want to label them. So that's the advantage of picking very early on. Looking at the middle selection of picks, again, 5 through 8 in this scenario. The nice thing about that is you don't have to wait super long one way or the other when making your pick in the first round, in the second round, a third round, so on and so forth. A lot of times when there are values and guys drop for one reason or another, it's usually these range of picks that can capitalize on that the most or the easiest, or that's just the highest percentage of success to capitalize on a situation like that. Now, again, you're going to have an increased chance of getting sniped, or you might just barely miss out on that top tier group of talent with the first couple of selections. So that is something to keep in mind. You are also still potentially in that range of a tier drop off. But again, if something crazy happens, you do have an outside chance that one of those top tier guys can fall to you in the second or in the third round. And typically, it's a good spot to be able to land, a top tier quarterback or a top tier tight end without having to reach too much. In this case, see the example. Josh Allen goes with pick 210, yet Patrick Mahomes goes at pick 308, right in the middle in the third round. Sam Laporta, also a guy that, again, a top tier tight end. You can kind of start that trend right around that spot. So that's what that kind of range sets itself up for. Typically, I like to pick right around this range, at least the last couple of years, because, again, you don't have to reach too much. Pretty good talent is going to be there. And if your league mates do something, out of the norm, you can take advantage, because I would say having somebody like a Bijan and Breece Hall in this range of picks, again, 5 through 8, is an absolute steal, potentially the best value in the first round. So that's really, really nice. Now, again, I will admit, every single draft will have its own flavor. We're just talking about what typically happens the majority of times. So now let's move on with that last group, the last several picks, in this case, picks 9 through 12. So similar to picking first overall, those first 4 picks, here you're going to be at the other end of the extreme. So you're going to have to wait until you make your first selection. Now, your first and second round picks are going to be close together, but then your second and third on the flip side are going to, again, be pretty much 20 picks apart. So some of that value that you are hoping for won't necessarily get back to you. But I do think, as you can see here, that if you want to go with a quarterback at the end of the third round, you typically still have your option of a tier 1 quarterback, which I can appreciate if you want to go that route. Now, typically, that's not the way I do it, but again, we're just talking about the best draft pick and what that draft pick allows you to do. So having flexibility, having options, that does equate to a better draft pick. Now, again, after that, what you do with that draft pick, that is up to you. That is not what we're talking about here. But let's talk about quite possibly the most important thing, which I actually previously mentioned, and that is those tier drops. And that's why I think looking at tiers is so important when talking rankings, when talking prepping for your fantasy football drafts. Because, again, to me, I'm going to go pick by pick here in the first round and within the next couple of picks in the second round. Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek, Amon-Ra, Bijan, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Breece Hall, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Jahmyr Gibbs. Then you have here Marvin Harrison, Jonathan Taylor, Puka Nacua. I think right after Puka Nacua, you have that tier break of a big drop-off at running back and big drop-off at wide receiver. You have some major question marks. I don't think after Puka Nacua, you are looking at guys that are very likely to finish, potentially top 5 in their position, or, finish as maybe the best overall guy at their position. And what I have noticed this year, and why I'm going to say without a doubt that the best draft spot to have is in this final range of picks 9 through 12. Let me say it again, the best draft spot to have somewhere in between picks 9 and 12 this year is because it allows you in the first 2 rounds to walk away from your draft with 2 top tier guys at the running back and wide receiver position, or 2 top tier guys at the wide receiver position, like two wide receivers like an A.J. Brown and a Puka Nacua, something of that nature. And I think that gives you such a huge advantage. Getting 2 top tier guys on the same roster, 2 stars, is a big deal. Now, yes, you have a chance to do that in the third and fourth round, but usually in the first two rounds, if you hit on those superstars in the first two rounds, your roster is going to be pretty good. And that's what picking here allows you to do. Now, I'm going to break it down further because, I'm giving you a range, picks 9 through 12. I think more specifically, the best pick is either pick 11, so the second to last pick, or the last pick in your drafts this year. The reason that I say that is because, in my opinion, there are 14 players that are in that tier 1 category for running backs and wide receivers combined. Marvin Harrison is not in that category. Puka Nacua would be in that category. So basically flip Marvin Harrison and Puka Nacua. Now, from there on out, how you want to approach the draft in the first round, whether you want to go running back first or wide receiver first, that is a strategy that you will have to decide by yourself and by looking at what has happened before, what you think can happen afterwards, the players that are available. So in this case, what I ended up doing is I had the 11th pick overall. I ended up selecting Garrett Wilson, who I view as a really high upside wide receiver. I saw that both Jahmyr Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor were left available. To me, Garrett Wilson was by far and away the best wide receiver available. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take a gamble that either Jahmyr Gibbs or Jonathan Taylor will fall to me. We lucked out, and that is exactly what happened. In this case, it was Jonathan Taylor. I think Jonathan Taylor is right there at the end of the tier 2 running backs with Barkley, with Jahmyr Gibbs, and with himself in that top 5 range. So in this scenario, we walk out, I think you can argue, with 2 top 5 talents at both running back and wide receiver. That is a huge advantage. You will not be able to do that at any other position here, at any other draft spot, other than right here with the last pick and the second to last pick overall. Because at that point in time, if you're looking at the McCaffrey squad, landing somebody like a Pacheco, I get it. He's got high upside, but he kind of falls in that middling, low-end tier RB1 type of category. And then you can pull the trigger on the first tight end, but I think tight end, you have a lot of names this year that can finish as the top tight end overall. So I have question marks there. And at that point in time, you have seen the drop-off at wide receiver and at running back. I mean, look at it. Michael Pittman, Brendan Ayuk, Jalen Waddle. There's some good names, but nothing like where you're going to have those guys absolutely carry you week in and week out. None of those guys are the number 1 wide receivers on their teams, or if they are, it's a very full group of pass catchers, or it's a run-first team. So those are the issues that you have there, which is why I love that second to last pick and the last pick overall this season. Also, again, if you're somebody that wants to get a tier 1 quarterback, I typically am not, but I decided to do it here so I can illustrate the point. Picking right around the end of the third round usually gives you the chance to land either a Patrick Mahomes or a Jalen Hurts. And if you don't, you can still land I think a high-end running back too, like an Alvin Kamara, like a Josh Jacobs potentially, like a James Cook, and then get another high-end wide receiver too, like a Cooper Kupp, for example. Nico Collins, depending on how you feel about him, DJ Moore again. And then typically, if you want to, in the fourth round, select one of those top tier tight ends that are still left, you can do so here, because usually they go, the next group of guys, Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid, go somewhere in the 5th round. So here, I think it's enough to go ahead and simulate just 5-6 rounds, because once you get to the 8th, 9th round, there's going to be more dart throws. It's going to be more depth pieces and more bench pieces. That at that point in time, it's going to come down to how much research you have done. It's going to come down to how much you've paid attention to camp reports, how you've constructed your roster up until that point. Because the core of your roster really is constructed, I would say, in the first 5 or 6 rounds. That's why it's so important here with the first 2 picks being able to land 2 top-tier guys. So again, for that reason, I think this year in particular, having one of those last or second to last picks is absolutely the best case scenario. I have had the most success in those situations with all the mock drafts that I have done personally, regardless of the format. I think I've had the best draft grades in those situations. Those are the teams that I have liked the most for myself when I've kind of gone through roster to roster. It gives you flexibility. You can choose the path you go on with quarterback, with tight end, if you're somebody that values getting those tier one guys at that position as well. So again, even though you have to wait a lot in between your second and third round pick, the 1-2 punch that you have with your first 2 round selections, I think just is so much better than what combo anyone else can do in the first 2 rounds, that you're immediately a step above. And then naturally in the third and fourth rounds, the natural teardrops that just happen from position to position, it's going to affect everyone. But the fact that you can take advantage of not experiencing that in the first 2 rounds is what will set you apart, and why, if you can, you want to have one of those final 2 picks, the second to last or the last pick in this 2024 fantasy football draft. But that is it. That is my 2 cents on this conversation. The best draft spot to have in your 2024 fantasy football drafts. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree, if you view it one way or another, along with any other questions you guys might have. We'll do our best to answer them all. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.